I never thought my quiet suburban neighborhood would turn into the center of a ridiculous feud, but sometimes peace doesn't last forever. What started as a simple disagreement about property lines quickly spiraled into something that could have been pulled straight from a courtroom drama or a reality TV show. If I had known how much trouble my new neighbor, let's just call her Karen, would cause me, maybe I would have thought twice before moving here. But life doesn't give warnings like that. It all started on an early Saturday morning. The sun was barely up, and I was sitting in my backyard with a mug of coffee, enjoying the calm. My dog, Max, was chasing a squirrel along the fence line, his tail wagging furiously. I had only been living here for about 3 months, and so far, everything had been perfect. Friendly neighbors, quiet evenings, and a backyard big enough for Max to burn off his endless energy. That's when I heard it, the sound of wood cracking. At first, I thought Max might have knocked something over, but when I looked toward the fence on the west side of my yard, I saw something that made my stomach twist. A woman, probably in her late 40s, blonde bob haircut, oversized sunglasses even though the sun wasn't fully out yet, was standing with one leg already inside my yard. And in her hands? A hammer. Yes, she was literally tearing down a section of my fence. "Hey, what do you think you're doing?" I shouted, nearly spilling my coffee as I stood up. She didn't flinch, didn't even look guilty. She just kept working at the fence like she had every right in the world to do it. "This fence is in my way," she said flatly, her voice sharp like nails on a chalkboard. "I need a shortcut to the street. Walking around takes too long." For a second, I thought maybe I had misheard her. Who in their right mind thinks it's okay to destroy someone else's property just because walking an extra 30 seconds is too inconvenient? But no, her smug face and deliberate swings of the hammer told me she meant it. "That's my fence," I snapped, storming closer. "You can't just tear it down because you're lazy." She finally turned to face me, arms crossed, hammer dangling carelessly from one hand. "Listen, sweetie, this fence has always been a problem. Everyone in the neighborhood knows it. You just moved here, so you don't understand. I've lived here for 15 years, and I've always cut across this yard. You can't just show up and change things." My jaw dropped. "Are you kidding me? You've been trespassing for years, and now you're mad because I put up a fence to keep my dog safe?" Karen rolled her eyes so hard I thought they might get stuck. "Don't be dramatic. It's just a shortcut. It doesn't hurt anyone." Max barked loudly, clearly sensing my frustration. He ran to the broken part of the fence and growled at her. Karen pointed at him and smirked. "See? Aggressive dog. That's why fences are a nuisance. They make animals territorial." At that moment, I realized I was dealing with the kind of neighbor I had only ever heard about in online horror stories, the dreaded Karen. I took a deep breath and tried to keep my voice calm. "I'm going to ask you nicely one more time. Put the hammer down, step out of my yard, and stop touching my fence." Her smirk grew wider. "Or what? You'll call the hoe?" "Honey, I am the hoe president." And there it was, the power trip. Suddenly, her sense of entitlement made perfect sense. She wasn't just some random neighbor with bad manners. She was the self-proclaimed ruler of this subdivision. I clenched my jaw. "Well, I'm not part of your hoe, so your rules don't apply to me." Her face twisted into pure rage. She jabbed a finger at me. "You think you can just ignore the hoe? Everyone in this community follows the rules, and you will too. That fence comes down, or I'll make your life miserable." And then, without another word, she stomped back through the broken panel and disappeared into her yard, leaving me staring at the splintered wood. I stood there in disbelief, my heart pounding. This was no ordinary neighborly disagreement. This was war. For the rest of the weekend, I kept Max inside and avoided going into the backyard, but the damage had already been done. Every time I looked out the window, I caught glimpses of Karen pacing along the property line, glaring at my house like a hawk watching prey. It felt creepy, like she was just waiting for me to slip up so she could pounce. On Monday, I decided enough was enough. I called a local contractor to come fix the fence, and while he was working, I explained what had happened. The guy, whose name was Tony, chuckled and shook his head. "Let me guess," he said. Blonde woman? Talks a lot about hoe rules? My eyes widened. You've met her? More times than I care to, Tony said. She's notorious around here. Half my jobs involve repairing stuff she's either complained about or damaged herself. You've got your hands full, buddy. Great. Just great. That evening, when the fence was repaired, I thought maybe things would calm down. But no. The very next morning, I woke up to find a bright orange notice taped to my front door. It was from the hoe, stating that my fence violated community aesthetic standards and had to be removed immediately. I almost laughed out loud. The timing was too perfect. Karen had clearly wasted no time abusing her position. I grabbed the notice, crumpled it in my fist, and marched straight to her house. She was out front watering her flowers, humming like she didn't have a care in the world. "Karen," I called out. "We need to talk." She turned, her fake smile plastered on her face. "Oh, hi, neighbor. Lovely day, isn't it?" I shoved the notice toward her. "You did this, didn't you?" Her smile widened. "Of course I did. That fence is an eyesore. You'll thank me later when your property value goes up." I took a step closer, my voice low and firm. "You don't have authority over me. I'm not in your hoe. Stop harassing me, or I'll get the law involved." Her smile faltered just slightly, but she quickly recovered. "We'll see about that." As I walked back to my house, I knew this was only the beginning. Karen wasn't going to stop until she got her way. But what she didn't know was that I had something she didn't, a stubborn streak just as strong as hers. And if she wanted a fight, then a fight was exactly what she was going to get. When I said I was ready for a fight, I didn't quite realize what I was signing up for. If Karen had one talent, it was persistence, mixed with just the right amount of arrogance to make her believe she could bulldoze anyone who dared stand in her way. And she wasn't wasting any time proving it. The morning after our argument, I woke up to the sound of loud voices outside. At first, I thought it was just kids walking to school or someone on their phone. But when I pulled back my curtains, I saw a group of neighbors standing at the edge of my property. And at the center of that group, Karen. She had a stack of papers in her hands and was waving them around like she was delivering a sermon. "And this fence is a violation of our community's values," she declared, loud enough for me to hear through the glass. "We cannot allow new residents to just do whatever they want. This sets a terrible precedent." I couldn't believe it. She had actually gathered people to stage some sort of ho-pep rally against me. I stepped out onto my porch, arms crossed. "Is there a reason you're all standing in front of my house?" Karen smiled sweetly, though her eyes narrowed with venom. "We're simply discussing neighborhood concerns, dear. You see, everyone agrees your fence doesn't match the aesthetic of the community. It's disruptive." A man in the crowd spoke up, hesitantly. Karen, I don't really care about the fence. It's not bothering anyone." Her head snapped toward him so fast, I thought she might sprain her neck. "Greg, this is about principles. If we allow one person to ignore the rules, soon the whole neighborhood will fall apart." Greg raised his hands in surrender. "I'm just saying, it's not worth fighting over." I almost laughed. Finally, someone who saw reason. But Karen wasn't having it. She turned back to me and jabbed her finger in the air. "You see? This is exactly what I warned you about. Division. Chaos. You're tearing this neighborhood apart." "Karen," I said firmly, stepping down off the porch. "I'm not in your hoe. You can't tell me what to do with my property. And if you keep trespassing or damaging my fence, I'll file a police report." The crowd shifted uncomfortably. A few people murmured among themselves. Clearly, they weren't thrilled about being dragged into this spectacle. Karen, however, wasn't deterred. "Police? Don't be ridiculous. No one will take you seriously. This is an internal home matter." I shook my head. "No, this is a property rights matter. And trust me, the law is very clear on that." She glared at me like I had personally insulted her ancestors. "Fine. If you want to play hardball, we'll play hardball." And with that, she stormed off, her little entourage dispersing like a flock of confused birds. I thought maybe, just maybe, she'd back down after realizing she didn't have as much support as she thought. But Karen wasn't wired that way. If anything, my defiance only fueled her fire. Later that week, I came home from work to find another notice taped to my door. This time, it wasn't about aesthetics. According to Karen, my fence was now a safety hazard. She claimed it obstructed visibility for drivers on the nearby street, which was absurd. My fence wasn't even close to the street. It sat neatly on my property line, surrounded by my yard, nowhere near any roads. It was clear she was just inventing excuses to harass me. So I decided to take a different approach. Instead of reacting angrily, I started documenting everything. I took pictures of the fence, recorded videos whenever she came near my property, and saved every ridiculous notice she left. My friends thought I was paranoid, but I had a feeling I'd need evidence sooner rather than later. And sure enough, that evidence came in handy faster than expected. One Saturday morning, I was mowing the lawn when I noticed Karen in her yard, watching me like usual. I ignored her, focusing on my work. But then she did something that made my blood boil. She pulled out her phone, aimed it at me, and started recording. "What are you doing?" I shouted over the sound of the mower. "Gathering evidence," she yelled back. "For when I present your violations to the board." I turned off the mower and walked closer to the property line. "Violations? You've been harassing me nonstop since I moved in. I don't have to answer to your board. I'm not part of your hoe." She smirked, clearly enjoying herself. "We'll see what the judge says about that." The judge? So now she was threatening legal action. That night, I called my cousin, who happens to be a real estate attorney. I explained everything that had happened so far. After a long say, he said, "Sounds like you've got yourself a classic hoe bully. But don't worry. If she tries to drag you into court, she doesn't have a leg to stand on. As long as your property is indeed restricted under the hoe, she has no authority over you." That gave me some peace of mind, but Karen didn't let up. Over the next few weeks, she escalated in ways I couldn't have imagined. First, she started leaving passive-aggressive notes in my mailbox, things like, "Your lawn is 0.5 inches too long," or "Your paint color doesn't match community guidelines." I ignored them, of course, but the sheer pettiness was astonishing. Then, she began gossiping to other neighbors, spreading lies about me. One evening, I overheard two people whispering as I walked by. "Did you hear? Karen says he's keeping aggressive dogs in his yard. She also said he's planning to turn his house into a rental." None of it was true, but she knew exactly what she was doing, trying to isolate me socially so I'd cave under the pressure. But the final straw came one evening when I let Max out into the backyard. He ran straight to the fence, barking like crazy. I walked over and froze. The fence had been tampered with again. Not broken this time, but loosened, like someone had pried at the boards to make a gap just big enough for a duck to slip through. My heart sank. If Max had pushed too hard, he could have escaped straight into the street. That was no accident. That was Karen. I called the police immediately. When the officer arrived, I explained everything, showing him the pictures, videos, and notices I had collected. He listened patiently, nodding as I spoke. "Unfortunately," he said, "without clear evidence of her actually damaging the fence, it's hard to press charges. But I'll file a report. That way, if anything else happens, there's a record." It wasn't the slam-dunk victory I wanted, but it was something. The next day, I noticed Karen avoiding eye contact with me for the first time since this all began. Maybe the police visit had shaken her confidence a little, but I knew her well enough by now to realize she wouldn't stop. She'd just changed tactics. And I was right. 2 weeks later, I got an official-looking letter in the mail. At first, I thought it was junk, but when I opened it, my stomach dropped. It was a legal notice. Karen had actually filed a lawsuit. Her claim? That my property was, in fact, subject to the HOA's rules, and by keeping the fence up, I was in violation. My cousin wasn't surprised when I called him panicked. "She doesn't have a case," he said confidently. "But she's counting on you not knowing your rights. Don't worry, we'll fight this." Still, the thought of going to court over something as ridiculous as a fence made my blood boil. That night, as I sat in my backyard staring at the fence that had caused so much drama, I realized something important. Karen thought she could wear me down with intimidation, gossip, and legal threats. She thought I'd eventually give in just to make the problem go away. But what she didn't realize was that I was just as stubborn as she was. maybe even more. And if she wanted a battle in court, then I was ready to give her one. The morning of the court date felt unreal. I had never been sued before, and the idea of walking into a courtroom over something as trivial as a fence was almost laughable if it wasn't so stressful. My cousin Daniel, who also happened to be my attorney, reassured me the entire drive there. "Listen," he said firmly, adjusting his tie as we pulled into the courthouse parking lot. "This isn't going to be what she thinks it is. Karen's relying on intimidation, not facts. Once the judge sees the deed and the property records, this whole case falls apart." I nodded, though my stomach churned. "You've seen how far she'll go, though. What if she's hiding something?" Daniel smirked. "Then we'll expose it. Trust me, I've dealt with hoe tyrants before. They're all bark, no bite." Walking into the courthouse felt like stepping into a movie scene. Karen was already there, standing with her arms crossed and a smug grin plastered on her face. She was dressed head to toe in business attire, as if she were about to argue a case before the Supreme Court. A couple of her supporters from the neighborhood sat behind her, whispering and nodding in approval. When she saw me, her smile widened. "Oh, look who decided to show up. I was starting to think you'd be too scared." I ignored her and followed Daniel to our seats. He leaned toward me and whispered, "Let her gloat. She's going to eat those words." The bailiff called the court to order, and the judge entered, a stern-looking man in his early 60s who wasted no time. "All right," the judge began. "This case involves the Homeowners Association versus Mr. Collins regarding a property fence. Let's hear from the plaintiff." Karen stood, practically glowing with confidence. "Your Honor," she began, her voice dripping with fake politeness. "This case is about a community being disrupted by one individual who refuses to follow the rules. As president of the HO, it is my duty to ensure that all residents maintain the harmony and appearance of our neighborhood. This man," she pointed at me dramatically, "has erected an unsightly and unsafe fence that not only violates HO guidelines but also endangers the flow and accessibility of the community." I nearly laughed out loud. "Endangers the flow of the community?" She made it sound like my wooden fence was a dam holding back a flood. Karen went on, stacking lie upon lie. "Furthermore, Your Honor, he has ignored multiple notices, refused to cooperate, and has displayed hostility toward myself and other residents. We believe his property is, in fact, subject to HO governance, and therefore, his refusal constitutes a direct violation." When she finally sat down, the judge scribbled a few notes, then turned to Daniel. "Defense?" Daniel stood smoothly, exuding calm confidence. "Your Honor, the plaintiff has presented a very colorful story, but the facts are far less dramatic. My client's property is not, and never has been, part of the HO. The deed is clear, the title is clear, and the county records are clear. The association has no legal authority over him. Additionally, the fence in question was built well within property lines, adheres to city codes, and serves the simple purpose of keeping his dog safe. There is no evidence of safety hazards, nor any obligation to HO guidelines." He handed the judge a thick folder of documents, deeds, surveys, even photos. Karen jumped up from her seat, unable to contain herself. "That's not true. That land has always been part of the HO. Everyone knows it." The judge held up a hand. "Sit down, Ms. Parker." Karen huffed but obeyed, her face reddening. Daniel continued. "Furthermore, we have evidence of the plaintiff, Ms. Parker, harassing my client. Notices left without legal basis, gossip and defamation within the community, and even possible tampering with his property fence." The judge's eyes narrowed. "Tampering?" Daniel nodded. "Yes, Your Honor. While we don't have direct footage of her committing the act, the pattern of behavior and timing strongly suggest intent to cause harm. A police report was filed regarding the incident." The judge tapped his pen on the desk, clearly displeased with what he was hearing. "Ms. Parker," he said slowly, "do you have documentation proving that the defendant's property is within HO jurisdiction?" Karen shot a glance at her papers, flipping through them frantically. "Well, no, but it's common knowledge. Everyone in the neighborhood has always—" "Stop!" the judge interrupted sharply. Court decisions are not based on common knowledge. They're based on legal documentation. If you cannot provide a deed restriction or annexation document proving this property falls under the HO, then your entire claim has no standing. Her mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. But the community guidelines, the judge snapped, apply only to those who are legally bound by them. Which, at this moment, it seems Mr. Collins is not. I could feel the shift in the room. Karen's smugness evaporated, replaced by a kind of desperate anger. The judge leaned back in his chair. Given the evidence, I am inclined to dismiss this case. Not only has the plaintiff failed to prove jurisdiction, but it also appears there may be a misuse of HO authority here. Ms. Parker, you are advised to refrain from harassing neighbors under the guise of HO enforcement. Karen shot to her feet again, her voice cracking. You don't understand. If he keeps that fence, it ruins the neighborhood. He's a troublemaker. Enough, the judge barked. Case dismissed. The gavel came down with a bang that echoed through the courtroom. For a moment, there was silence. Then Karen let out a strangled noise, half scream, half growl, before storming out of the courtroom. Her little entourage trailed after her, whispering nervously. I sat there, stunned but relieved, as Daniel patted my shoulder. Told you. No leg to stand on. Outside, as we walked toward the parking lot, Karen was waiting, arms crossed, her face twisted with fury. This isn't over, she hissed, stepping in front of me. You think one judge can stop me? You don't know who you're dealing with. Daniel stepped between us. Actually, Miss Parker, I think you've just learned who you're dealing with. If you continue this harassment, we'll pursue legal action against you. And trust me, we'll win. She glared at him, then at me, before storming off toward her car. The tire screeched as she sped out of the lot. I exhaled deeply, feeling like a massive weight had been lifted. We'd won. The fence was safe. Max was safe. And best of all, Karen had been humiliated in front of a judge. But deep down, I knew it wasn't truly over. People like Karen don't just walk away after losing. No, they double down. They scheme. They find new angles. And I wasn't wrong. The very next week, I noticed a city inspector parked outside my house. He walked up to the door, clipboard in hand, and explained that someone had filed multiple complaints about my property, everything from unsafe fencing to improper waste disposal. I didn't need to ask who had filed them. I already knew. Karen was back, and this time she was dragging the city into it. If I thought the courtroom defeat would finally humble Karen, I was dead wrong. People like her don't just walk away after being embarrassed in front of a judge. No, they regroup, refuel, and come back with new schemes. And sure enough, within a week of winning the case, I found myself facing yet another battle. It started on a Tuesday morning. I was sipping my coffee when I noticed a white sedan parked across the street. The man inside wore a reflective vest and was holding a clipboard. At first, I thought he was just a utility worker. But then he walked up my driveway, knocked on my door, and introduced himself. Good morning, he said, flashing an ID badge. I'm with the City Inspections Department. We've received multiple complaints about your property. I blinked. Complaints? About what? He flipped through his clipboard. Unsafe fencing. Overgrown lawn. Improper waste disposal. Unpermitted construction. I almost spit out my coffee. What? None of that is true. He gave me a sympathetic smile. I figured as much. Honestly, this isn't uncommon. Sometimes we get clusters of complaints that clearly come from one person with, let's say, a vendetta. But I still have to follow procedure. I showed him the yard, the fence, the trash bins, everything spotless and up to code. He checked boxes on his form and nodded. You're fine, he said finally. No violations here. I'll file the report accordingly. Relief washed over me. But the relief was short-lived, because the very next day, another inspector showed up. This time, it was someone from animal control claiming there had been reports of an aggressive, uncontrolled dog on my property. I stared at the guy in disbelief, while Max wagged his tail happily beside me, licking the inspector's hand like he was his new best friend. Yeah, the inspector chuckled, scratching Max behind the ears. This doesn't exactly look like a vicious dog to me. I'll close this out. And just like that, complaint after complaint began rolling in. Noise violations, alleged illegal backyard fires, even a supposed rat infestation. Each time, some poor city worker had to come out, only to leave shaking their head once they realized everything was fine. It was exhausting. Every knock on the door sent my stomach twisting, because I knew it was another of Karen's games. She was trying to drown me in nuisance inspections, hoping I'd either cave in or make a mistake. But I refused to give her that satisfaction. I documented every visit. I started a binder, logging the date, the department, the complaint, and the outcome. By the end of the first month, that binder was already 2 inches thick. Of course, Karen didn't just stop with the city. She started taking her campaign of harassment into new territory. One afternoon, I came home to find a delivery truck parked awkwardly outside my driveway. The driver looked flustered. "Sorry, man," he said when I asked what was wrong. "Your neighbor over there," he nodded toward Karen's house, "came out screaming at me, said I couldn't park here, said I was blocking emergency access." I sighed. "You're not blocking anything. Don't worry about her." He chuckled nervously. "Yeah, she threatened to call my company. Said she was going to report me." "Is she always like that?" "Always," I muttered. "Welcome to the neighborhood." It didn't stop there. She flagged down landscapers, harassed postal workers, even shouted at the pizza delivery guy. It was like she'd declared war on anyone who so much as set foot near my property. By now, most of the neighborhood was starting to get fed up. People who once humored her whole antics were beginning to see the truth. I overheard conversations at the mailbox, whispers at the corner store. "Karen's losing it. She's obsessed with that fence. Can you believe she called the city on him 5 times in 1 week?" The tide was turning, and Karen could feel it, which only made her double down harder. One evening, as I was pulling into my driveway, she marched straight up to my car, arms flailing. "You think you're clever, don't you?" she hissed through the open window. "You think you can make me look like a fool? Well, guess what? People still listen to me. I built this neighborhood. You're just a parasite." I killed the engine and stepped out slowly, keeping my cool. "Karen, you've already lost in court. You've wasted the city's time with false complaints. Do yourself a favor and stop before this gets worse for you." Her eyes burned with fury. "Worse? Oh, it's going to get worse for you." She stormed off before I could reply, slamming her front door so hard I thought the windows would shatter. That night, I sat on my back porch with Max at my feet, thinking about everything that had happened since moving in. What was supposed to be a peaceful home had turned into a battleground. And as much as I hated to admit it, Karen was winning in one sense. She was wearing me down. But then, something unexpected happened. The next morning, I found a note slipped under my door. At first, I braced myself for another one of Karen's nasty messages. But when I unfolded the paper, I realized it was from someone else. It read, "We're tired of Karen too. If you ever need witnesses for what she's been doing, you have our support. Signed, your neighbors at 214. I couldn't help but smile. For the first time, I realized I wasn't alone in this. Others were fed up too. And with their help, maybe I could finally turn the tables. So I kept documenting. I collected stories from neighbors, got written statements, even asked the delivery guys to jot down what had happened. Piece by piece, I was building a case, not just against Karen's lies, but against her entire campaign of harassment. And then came the break I had been waiting for. One Saturday afternoon, I installed a new outdoor security camera facing the backyard. Not because I expected anything major to happen that day, but because I was tired of always being on edge. But wouldn't you know it, less than 24 hours later, the camera caught something shocking. The footage showed Karen sneaking into my yard at night, flashlight in hand. She walked straight to the fence, knelt down, and started working at the boards with some kind of tool. I watched, jaw clenched, as she tried to loosen the planks. After several minutes, she gave up and slinked back into the darkness. That was it. That was the proof I needed. When I showed Daniel the footage, his eyes lit up. This is gold. She can't spin her way out of this. With this video, we can press charges for trespassing and vandalism. And given the police report you already filed, this will look very, very bad for her. For the first time in months, I felt real hope. Karen thought she could bully me forever, but now the tables were about to turn. And this time, I wasn't just going to defend myself. I was going on the offensive. The next morning, I woke up with a plan. For weeks, I had been reacting to Karen's attacks, always playing defense. But with the footage of her sneaking into my yard, everything had shifted. Now, I had the upper hand. I called Daniel first thing. "You still have that binder?" he asked. "Of course," I replied. "Every complaint, every visit, every statement, it's all there." "Good," he said firmly. "Because today, we're going to the police." The police station, walking into the precinct, binder under one arm and a flash drive in my pocket, I felt nervous but determined. This wasn't just about me anymore. Karen had harassed city workers, neighbors, delivery drivers. She had turned the entire street into her personal battleground. The officer at the front desk led us to a small interview room. A detective entered, notepad ready. "So, what seems to be the issue?" he asked. I took a deep breath and started from the beginning, moving into the neighborhood. The phony hoe, the lawsuit, the endless stream of bogus complaints. Daniel chimed in here and there, clarifying the legal aspects. Then I handed over the flash drive. "This," I said, "is the most recent incident. It shows my neighbor trespassing onto my property at night, attempting to damage my fence." The detective plugged it into his laptop. As the footage played, his eyebrows shot up. "Well," he muttered, pausing the video, "that's pretty clear." "And you're sure this is her?" "Absolutely," I said. "That's Karen Mitchell. Lives directly next door. She's been at this for months." He leaned back in his chair, nodding slowly. "All right, we can definitely move forward on this. Trespassing, attempted vandalism. Given the history, maybe even harassment. I'll forward this to the DA's office." Relief surged through me. Finally, Karen's reign of intimidation was cracking. The arrest. 2 days later, it happened. I was in the kitchen when I saw flashing lights outside. A patrol car pulled up to Karen's house. Moments later, 2 officers knocked on her door. From my window, I watched the scene unfold like something out of a movie. Karen stormed onto the porch, waving her arms, shouting loud enough for the whole street to hear. "This is ridiculous. I'm the president of this neighborhood. You can't do this to me." The officers remained calm, but firm. After a few tense minutes, they placed her in handcuffs. She kicked and screamed, calling them names, shouting about her rights. But it didn't matter. They guided her into the back of the squad car and drove off. I stood there, stunned. For months, she had made my life miserable. And now, she was finally facing consequences. But as satisfying as it was, I knew this wasn't over. People like Karen don't just go quietly. Karen's counterattack. Sure enough, the very next week, I got a letter in the mail. Not from the city, not from the police, but from Karen's attorney. It was a lawsuit. She was suing me for defamation, claiming that my false accusations had caused her public humiliation, emotional distress, and irreparable harm to her reputation as a community leader. I almost laughed out loud. Karen, the self-appointed queen of the hoe that didn't exist, was accusing me of ruining her reputation? Daniel, however, wasn't amused. "This is classic Karen," he said after reading the papers. "She's trying to flip the script. Don't worry, though, we can crush this. You've got evidence, witnesses, city records, video footage. If anything, this case will only expose her further." Still, the thought of another court battle drained me. I had barely recovered from the last one. But this time, I wasn't going to be caught off guard. Gathering the army, over the next few weeks, I doubled down on building my defense. Neighbors who had once stayed silent now came forward eagerly. The couple from 214 gave sworn affidavits about Karen screaming at delivery drivers. The postal worker signed a statement about her harassing him. Even the pizza guy wrote a letter describing the night she berated him in the rain. By the time Daniel and I were done, the binder had grown into two binders, each one packed with evidence of Karen's behavior. And the best part? The city inspectors who had been repeatedly called to my property agreed to testify too. They were fed up with her wasting their time. It was no longer just me versus Karen. It was Karen versus the entire neighborhood. Court, round two. When the day of the trial arrived, the courtroom was packed. Word had spread, and neighbors showed up to watch. Some even brought snacks, like it was entertainment. Karen strutted in wearing a bright red blazer, chin high, as if she were about to give a presidential speech. Her lawyer followed behind, carrying a briefcase that looked too heavy for him. The judge, a different one from before, called the court to order. Karen's attorney launched into a dramatic opening statement about a good woman slandered by lies, painting Karen as a victim of a neighbor's vendetta. Then it was our turn. Daniel rose calmly, placed a hand on the binder, and began. Your Honor, what you are about to see is a pattern. A relentless, documented campaign of harassment by the plaintiff, now attempting to disguise herself as a victim. We have video evidence, sworn statements, and city records, all of which tell the same story. One by one, the witnesses came forward. The inspector, the delivery driver, the neighbors. Each testimony chipped away at Karen's facade. Then came the video. The courtroom fell silent as the screen lit up, showing Karen sneaking through my yard with a flashlight, tugging at the fence boards. Gasps echoed. Even the judge's expression hardened. Karen's lawyer tried to object, but the judge waved him down. When the lights came back on, Karen looked pale. Daniel delivered the closing argument with surgical precision. This case isn't about defamation. It's about accountability. The plaintiff has harassed my client, this community, and even city officials. She is not the victim here. She is the aggressor. The verdict. After a short recess, the judge returned. Having reviewed the evidence and testimony, he said firmly, it is clear that the plaintiff's claims of defamation are entirely without merit. This case is dismissed with prejudice. Karen's lawyer slumped in his chair. Karen herself sat frozen, jaw clenched, eyes wide with disbelief. But the judge wasn't done. Furthermore, he continued, the court finds sufficient cause to issue a restraining order against the plaintiff, prohibiting her from contacting or harassing the defendant or his property. Additionally, the court strongly recommends the district attorney review the matter for potential criminal charges related to the trespassing incident. The courtroom erupted in whispers. Karen's face turned crimson. I sat back in my chair, stunned. Not only had I won again, but the judge himself was calling for criminal review. It was over. Or at least, it should have been. Because if there's one thing I had learned by now, it's that Karen never admits defeat. And though she'd just suffered her biggest loss yet, deep down, I knew she was already plotting her next move. The morning after the verdict, I thought it was over. I thought maybe, just maybe, Karen would take the loss, lick her wounds, and retreat. But I underestimated her. People like Karen don't retreat. They double down. And this time, she wasn't just going after me. She was going after anyone she could reach. The last gasps of control. It started small. Code inspectors showed up at houses all over the block. Not just mine, every neighbor who had testified against her. She had flooded the city with complaints again. Lawn too long. Trash cans left out. Shed not painted. Porch light too bright. The inspectors, tired of being dragged into Karen's crusade, just rolled their eyes. Some didn't even bother writing reports anymore. They knew the pattern. But the fact that she was still trying, still reaching for that shred of power, it made the entire street feel like they were living under siege. One night, I came home to find spray-painted words on my fence. Liar, in big red letters. I didn't have to wonder who had done it. I filed another police report. Another investigation. Another waiting game. But as the days dragged on, I realized something important. Karen was unraveling. She wasn't careful anymore. She was reckless. And reckless people make mistakes. The idea, it happened by accident. I was talking with Mr. Alvarez, my neighbor 2 houses down. He was leaning on his rake, shaking his head. "She's losing it," he said. "I saw her screaming at the mailman yesterday." Poor guy dropped the whole bag and ran. We both laughed, but then he added something that made me stop. "You know, my cousin's in real estate. Says the property line behind Karen's lot, the one that touches your fence, has a small strip of land the city's been trying to sell for years. Nobody wanted it because it's too narrow to build on." A thought clicked into place. A boundary. The very thing Karen had fought me on since day one. The fence, the shortcut, the property line. It all came back to land. And if I could control that land. I called Daniel. He made a few phone calls. Within a week, the paperwork was in motion. The land wasn't expensive, just a thin strip, maybe 8 feet wide, stretching behind Karen's property like a forgotten border. But it was enough. Enough to give me full legal authority over the boundary. Enough to end her shortcut obsession once and for all. The day of the sale. When I signed the final papers at the county clerk's office, I felt a rush of triumph unlike anything before. That strip of dirt and weeds wasn't just land. It was leverage. It was justice. I drove straight home and started planning. A new fence. Higher. Stronger. Double-gated with a lock. For years, Karen had treated my property line like a suggestion. Now, I was going to make it a wall. The lock in. Construction began on a Saturday morning. The workers were efficient. By noon, they had already sunk the posts. By evening, panels were rising, tall and solid. Karen came storming out of her back door as soon as she heard the drills. "What do you think you're doing?" she shrieked. "Building on my land," I replied calmly. "This isn't your land. This is common property. You can't just—" I pulled out the deed and held it up. "Actually, it is. Bought it last week. Care to read the paperwork?" She froze. Her eyes darted from the document to the rising fence, then back to me. For the first time, I saw something I had never seen on her face before. Panic. "You can't do this to me," she screamed. "I need that access. I've been using that shortcut for years." "That's over now," I said simply. By sunset, the fence was complete. Sturdy. Locked. Karen's shortcut was gone. And with it, her illusion of control. The outburst. That night, the whole neighborhood heard it. Banging. Screaming. Karen pounding on the new fence like a wild animal, shrieking about her rights, her authority. But nobody came to help. The neighbors, once intimidated, once silent, now stood on their porches, arms crossed, watching her unravel. Some even filmed it. The next day, the videos were circulating online. Karen meltdown became the talk of the town. Her reputation, already fragile, shattered completely. The final straw. A week later, it all came crashing down. Karen, desperate and furious, tried one last stunt. She cut through the new lock with bolt cutters in the middle of the night. But this time, the cameras caught everything, clear as day. I handed the footage to the police. This time, there was no warning. No slap on the wrist. They arrested her again. Trespassing, vandalism, destruction of property. With the restraining order already in place, the charges were serious. And this time, the DA pressed them. Karen was facing real consequences. The neighborhood turns. The morning after her arrest, neighbors gathered in my driveway. Mr. Alvarez, the couple from 214, the postal worker, even the pizza guy. For the first time, we all felt free. "She's finally gone," Mrs. Thompson said, almost in tears. "Do you know how long she's been tormenting us? 15 years. 15 years of this." We talked for hours, sharing stories, laughing at the absurdity of it all. It felt like a weight had lifted from the entire street. The Karen had pretended to run, dissolved. Her reign of fear ended. Reflection. As I stood by the new fence, Max running happily in the yard, I thought back to that first day when I caught Karen breaking boards with her bare hands, demanding a shortcut. It had seemed so small then, just a fence, just a pushy neighbor. But it was never about the fence. It was about control, about someone who thought the rules didn't apply to her. In the end, it wasn't anger or revenge that defeated her. It was patience, evidence, persistence, and a little strip of forgotten land. But even as the neighborhood celebrated, I couldn't shake one thought. Karen was gone for now. But people like her, they always find a way back. And if she ever did, well, this time we'd be ready. The day Karen was arrested for the second time, the street felt different. For months, tension had lingered in the air like static before a storm. Every slammed car door, every raised voice had felt like another battle waiting to happen. But now, silence. It wasn't the uneasy silence of fear. It was peace. Still, I couldn't quite believe it was real. The courtroom finale. A month later, I was called to testify again. This time, it wasn't civil court, it was criminal. Karen was facing charges of trespassing, vandalism, destruction of property, and violating a restraining order. When I walked into the courtroom, she was already there. But she wasn't the same Karen I had known. The fire was gone from her eyes. The confidence, the smugness, the endless self-righteousness, it had all crumbled. She sat slouched, hands clasped tightly, muttering under her breath. Her lawyer looked exhausted, as if he regretted ever taking her case. The prosecutor laid out the evidence, my video footage, the police reports, the testimony from neighbors. It was all airtight. Every accusation was backed up by undeniable proof. When it was my turn, I kept it simple. I described what I had endured. The fence, the fake home notices, the harassment, the late-night vandalism. She didn't just go after me, I said, my voice steady. She went after everyone. Delivery workers, mail carriers, even the pizza guy. She turned an entire neighborhood into her battlefield. We just want to live in peace. Karen's lawyer tried to spin it. He claimed she was under stress, that she had made mistakes but didn't deserve harsh punishment. But then the prosecutor played the video of her cutting through my new lock, trespassing on land I had legally purchased, screaming obscenities into the night. That sealed it. The verdict. The judge didn't waste time. "Mrs. Mitchell," he said sternly, "your behavior has been reckless, destructive, and dangerous. You've harassed your neighbors, violated court orders, and repeatedly shown disregard for the law. This community deserves better." He sentenced her to probation, mandatory counseling, restitution for the damages, and community service hours. Most importantly, the restraining order was extended to 5 years, covering not just me, but multiple neighbors who had filed complaints. Karen's jaw dropped. She tried to protest, but the gavel came down, silencing her once and for all. And just like that, the reign of Ho Karen was over. The aftermath. The changes were immediate. For the first time in years, kids played in the cul-de-sac without parents nervously peeking out windows. Delivery drivers pulled up without fear of being screamed at. Neighbors waved at each other without whispering about what Karen might do. The couple from 214 hosted a block barbecue to celebrate. Everyone came, Mr. Alvarez with his famous ribs, the Thompsons with their potato salad. Even the mail carrier stopped by on his route for a hot dog. We laughed, we ate, we shared stories of Karen's antics like war veterans swapping battle tales. And then, for the first time, we started talking about the future, about block parties, holiday decorations, even maybe forming a real neighborhood committee, one that actually helped people instead of terrorizing them. It felt like a new beginning. Karen's house. Karen's house sat dark for weeks after the sentencing. The blinds stayed closed, the yard overgrown. Some said she barely left except for community service shifts. Others whispered she was planning to move. One day I saw a "for sale" sign hammered into her lawn. The neighborhood buzzed with relief. Whoever bought that house, anyone, would be better than Karen. When the moving truck finally came, no one waved goodbye. No one brought cookies. No one helped her pack. She left the same way she had lived, angry, shouting at the movers, complaining about everything. And when the truck turned the corner, disappearing down the street, a cheer went up. We were free. Reflection. That night, I sat on my porch with Max curled at my feet, listening to the quiet hum of crickets. The new fence stood tall at the back of my property, the lock gleaming under the porch light. It struck me how much had changed. When I first moved here, I just wanted a home. A quiet place with a yard for my dog, a little piece of peace. Instead, I'd walked straight into a war with a woman who thought she owned the world. But I hadn't backed down. And because of that, the whole neighborhood had found their voice. It wasn't just about me winning against Karen. It was about all of us reclaiming our street. Epilogue. Months later, I was walking Max when a new family moved into Karen's old house. They had kids, friendly smiles, and asked where the best pizza place was. I laughed. "Funny story," I said. "You'll like the guy who delivers." The mom looked at my fence and said, "That's a beautiful boundary. Must make you feel secure." I nodded. "Yeah, it does." What I didn't say was that the fence wasn't just wood and metal. It was a symbol, a reminder that sometimes the only way to deal with people like Karen is to stand firm, gather your evidence, and fight back calmly, patiently, but relentlessly. And when the battle is finally over, you don't just get peace. You get freedom. As Max wagged his tail, I realized something. The fence Karen tried to destroy had ended up saving us all.